So I want to talk about some of the work that Vincent Tinto did subsequent to Aston. And his focus was related but somewhat different, and that's how do students integrate once they get to a campus. So in other words, this is not preferring the model of commuter student, come and take a class and leave, come and take a class and leave. And so we'll kind of go through what his theory is and then talk about where the rubber meets the road. What is it that we need to do for this to happen? And then kind of conclude with an overall, what's the why? Why does this matter? And why are they asking you to give up part of a day to think about this? So his work on how students integrate, kind of assimilate into the life of a campus is really central to some of the work that's been done on student retention. And sometimes my job is just to give the obvious, but we need to remember when students come to college, they already have 13 plus years of prior academic experience, depending upon when they started preschool. So they already have a preconceived notion of what school is like and how to make it work for them or how to avoid it or whatever it is. And so when we think about residential campuses, this is a multiple stage change for students. It's probably their first time leaving home permanently. It's their first time, many, living with a roommate, because with the American birth rate dropping and the average family size decreasing, many students have never shared a room with a sibling. And they're trying to make their own food decisions, they're figuring out how to do laundry, they're figuring out what does chapel credit look like, all that. So they already come to campus with a preconceived notion of what school will be like. And so what his research showed, I'll give you the answer first, and then we'll get to how he got there. What his research showed is that students in their early weeks, that the first 3 weeks, 4 weeks of college are the most predictive of their staying power. And so that means kind of all hands on deck those first 3 weeks of college. And if you've got a pre-session for students, either they come in early for new student orientation, I would backfill it into that because that really begins to predict. And so it means we need a lot of spotters going on of which students are integrating well and which aren't. And so, student development focuses on a lot more things than this, but certainly student activities and student support. And so that can be in residence halls, clubs and organizations, and also spiritual life. And so those become integral to our work with the whole person. Faculty are required points of engagement because students have to come to class. Now, I'm speaking on all of this, I'll already acknowledge, and particularly for those of you online, we're talking about physically going to class. And so what does that engagement mean whenever we're teaching fully online? But also completing assignments. And so this is that, going back to Aston, both the physical and the psychological engagement. We can have students that go to class and don't engage. We can have students who engage and don't go to class. And so, but faculty become one of the big spotters of all this, and you wouldn't be surprised, but anything that has to do with residential life becomes another significant part of it. And so, again, a preview of the conclusion is that he found that students are really enhanced by learning communities. And we'll unpack a bit of what that means, because it can be done lots of different ways. But the idea is somewhat to bridge the two parts of the campus as it relates to the students' first few weeks. And that is, what is happening in the residence hall, clubs and organizations, student activities, and what is happening in the classroom. And so learning communities can be set up a number of ways to have shared knowledge, so the intentionality of there being a core group of classes that all freshmen take together can become really important, because on a campus they can start seeing some people in a few classes. They've come to campus, they may not know anyone, they may have a roommate or not have a roommate, They may be commuting a long distance, and so they don't have a roommate and they don't have much time to make friends. But if they can consistently see the same people, particularly in the first year of their time on campus, they are more likely to have a sense of belonging and to have people who can spot when they need support whenever they're faltering. And so the sharing classes together can be important. And then the shared responsibility that happens at the employee status, both faculty and staff, to begin to, the shared responsibility is that they start watching out for each other. And so they start, if you've got a study group that's meeting regularly in class, sometimes we have to rethink that too. Things where we'd say, well, between now and next week, get together with your study group. That has all kinds of things that can be a little fraught, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but particularly in the first year, how can we have both presence and engagement? And that might mean giving them some time. And so then they start, if it works well for them, and not all students are joiners, and not everyone in this room is a joiner, so you may be going, I would never want to do that because I'd never want it done to me. But the research does show if we can get the same people together, that it does give a bit more strength to the idea of student retention and a sense of belonging. Because just like the idea of they can be present physically and not there psychologically, they can retain and still not feel a sense of belonging. And so ideally, we're going to develop both. And so I pulled a few pictures from your website of things that you already are doing. I don't even know the settings, and I don't know if any of these people are in the room. But really, we want to start thinking about these bridges. And I would say that there can, depending upon the campus or the era, there can be some pretty strong divides between the academy and student affairs. And having been on both sides, I'm one that keeps saying we really do have a little more in common than we think. And there can be tensions on campus even among mid to junior staff who feel like they are overlooked in the process. I had a staff member, not in my area, but say to me not long ago, I'm really more important to the student than their faculty because I spend way more time with them because I'm supervising them as a student worker. And I'm going, well, that's not entirely true, but neither is it entirely untrue, because you get to shape what their work experience is like. And if they didn't have a job before, you do have. So every point of entry with a student is some point that can help us strengthen the connection, or at least be the, if you have ever lived in a neighborhood where kids are, usually it's a new development, moving in about the same time, so the kids are about the same age, and you start knowing the other people's kids' habits, and you sort of become spotters for, that kid's not supposed to be on that street, they live over here. And I think it's that same kind of thing here of how are we watching out for our students and helping them have a sense of belonging and engagement. And so I want to talk a good bit about this, and I'm stepping into territory where I may be just meddling, and the thing is, I won't be coming back here tomorrow. I'd like to still be friends, but I do want to kind of disrupt it a little bit and say, with what intentionality are we thinking through the first week, the second week, the third week of classes, well past add drop, so whatever your add drop is, add at least a week to that. And what kinds of things are we doing? This can be scaffolded of having all the RAs do something at least once this week with the students on their floor. It can be someone doing something with commuter students and providing them a lunch the first week, and then beginning to think, how are we checking in? And so this bridging across what the student experience is in the classroom and what the student experience is in other settings, residence hall, clubs and organizations, commuter groups, and then spiritual life is a significant part of this. And so one of the things that's always helpful, and you all probably do it already, but to begin to think about how many barrages are we giving students, because if the first week they're to find a study group, they're to be in a discipleship group, they're to be in some club or organization, they're going to be overwhelmed. And so how do we begin to be intentional on that and sort of add as we go? And then to, as I mentioned earlier, I'm really big on this, to consider these different student identities. And just because it's offered doesn't mean they're going to come. Just because it's offered doesn't mean they're going to know about it. If they're getting 37 emails in the same day from great offices on campus that all want to invite them and belong, but it's a passive outreach, they're going to quit reading the emails. And so we've got to think it with intentionality. That's why, and again, I'm assuming you do some of this, like activity fairs or ministry fairs or those kinds of things, where even in that process of being around lots of other people and not just sitting and doing a selection on a device, gets them more of a sense of passion for what it is that they may join. There's institutional benefits too. It's not single parenting on every single thing. It means that the person in the bookstore may see a student like come in and look at the books and put them back, and come in and put the books and look them back. They might be a spotter if you've got some kind of an emergency fund for a student that can't afford to buy textbooks. We've found over the years in different places I've been, sometimes the cafeteria workers have a greater sense of what's going on. When I was at Eastern Nazarene College and food service reported to me, I didn't even ask them, but they did. They'd let me know, like, this person hasn't swiped in for a whole week. And we've seen them around, but they're not eating. And so that could begin to be kind of an early spotter intervention. And with food and eating disorders, it's an important piece. So if everyone is sort of focusing, now we don't all want to be parenting over top of all of them, but really this coordinated effort of who is most at the margins. At the same time, those most in the middle run the risk of burnout. And so how do we find sort of in those concentric circles of levels of both engagement, not just presence, but engagement, who is most at risk? And that's a fluid kind of thing. They're going to change. But some of the early set points are going to be predictors of the future. Now, the other thing is that there's no single personality type. And there's some people, after talking all day, they want nothing other than just to have total silence. Those of us that are extreme extroverts, after we've been talking all day, we want to process about what we talked about, So part of it is that we're not all going to match every student, but for us to hopefully have students find someone with whom they can relate or at least look up to or ask for help. Now, I don't want to be totally mercenary about this, but this does enhance student completion rates. And student completion rates, I think, are significant for us for a number of reasons. First of all, I think it's an ethical issue. The students we admit, we are saying to them, we think you have the potential for success, and we have the supports in place for you to be successful. And so it never came home to me more early in my career than when we had moved from Maryland, the DC area, up to Boston area for me to work at Eastern Nazarene College. And there was a lovely family in our church, which was the hardest part of the move, leaving our church. But a lovely family in our church, and they had immigrated from a South American country, and I can't remember it at this point. The dad was a licensed pastor there, and he was coming also for additional education here. Their daughter was going to college the year before I went to ENC. And, she was going to start the year that I started. And so I saw them on campus when they came and moved her in, and of course gave them some extra attention. Saw them when they brought her back in January. And I saw the dad on campus March of that year. And I said, how's it going? And he said, we're coming to take her home. And I said, why? And he said, because she's failed every class. And that was just that term. She had done kind of okay in the fall. And what I realized was she was leaving with something like a $25,000 debt and no degree, and really a semester's worth. And so that kind of put it in to be even more of a passion to realize that our students who leave without a degree, not only is it the dream deferred, but it's also a very real thing of debt load that they're going to be carrying. And so I think we have certainly a measurement by the federal standards of completion rates, and so we want to be faithful to that. But I think it's even more a moral imperative that we're really intentional in providing that scaffolding. And even if a student decides to stop out, to help them think through all the pieces that would allow them to successfully return, and what can they do, like does a leave of absence help you better with your loan repayment schedule, those kinds of things. So all of those support services at point of entry and point of exit become important. So let's talk about service learning, and this can mean so many different things, and here's just a few of the things it can mean. So community-based service projects is often a way that can help students get engaged. I think of it as parallel play. So, you know, when kids are little, developmentally, they're always in need of something. Then they get to where they can do parallel play with each other, and it takes them a while to be able to interact at some reasonable level. And so I'm not calling college students infants, but I am saying that sometimes when they come, they are regressing on some things. And part of it is, it's really hard to walk into a big room with lots of people that you don't know. But if you're given a task to do, and you can do it alongside somebody, and you don't have to look at them. This was my parenting technique for a teenager, and I won't tell you if it was the daughter or the son. But whenever they just wouldn't talk, I'd create a need for an errand, and we'd get in the car and drive. And while I'm driving and they're sitting there, they would have a conversation that they would not have had across the kitchen counter or in the living room sitting across from each other. So how do we think about some intentionality of having students feel a sense of belonging, but not being on the spot? And so it's not there anymore, but when I first moved here, APU had the first week of classes, the students and faculty were out doing service projects in the community. I learned it because I lived way up in the foothills in Azusa, up Route 39, and I saw all these people in APU apparel out cleaning the way up to our development. But it was a way for people to it's often a way for students to get out into the community, but it's more importantly a way for them to see sort of a broader piece than who they're going to have in all their classes. But it also establishes a pattern for lifetimes of service, and you may or may not know Carnegie has different levels of community engaged student learning, and so there are also some both programs that can be adopted and sometimes some grants that you can apply for if this is something that you're thinking of doing. Experiential education, the whole idea of learning by doing, and so again, many classes in the first year can have an experience piece to it. That doesn't necessarily mean everybody's doing it all at the same time, but get them out both into the community so they get off campus, but also to be able to actually early on try out something that they think they're wanting to major in. I've done this, I don't think too long because I still wake up every day excited for what I get to do, but long enough that I'm going, oh yeah, this still keeps happening. And that is that it's such a shame whenever students get to like their third year and then they get into any type of an internship and realize, oh, this is not the career for me. And so having just prior to this role been Dean of the School of Education at APU for 12 years, we got to where in the first semester, of course, at the credential program in California is always at the graduate level, but the first semester we had them out in the classes, in local classrooms from week one. Because if within that first semester they could see that what I thought I wanted of teaching chemistry at the high school level or being a kindergarten teacher, I can't do the classroom management piece, or I really don't like the fact that I don't get to pick the curriculum or whatever it is, it gives them an easier exit strategy. And we could often help them find something else that those courses could apply to. But if you do it too far into the program, it's a pretty difficult recovery process. One of the things that also can work well, and it's mostly also a time saver for faculty. The initial planning isn't, but then if it can be a couple of courses or a couple of programs, that it's a shared experience and it can help, a student could go do a community-based service project, and a theology class could have them begin to think about where does service, what's Christ calling us to do in terms of service. And if they were doing a service project that was in a low-income preschool program, they could begin to see what does it mean either developmentally or education is a possibility. And so to be able to do an interdisciplinary approach, because again, if we have every program doing a service project and we have half or fewer of our students living on campus, and we have 60% or more working some, you can start to see that their day is eaten away. But to let them have a single experience and look at it from multiple perspectives can be quite strong. And service learning, when we go back to the Aston list of all the different types of students, the nerds and the and the ones that are just there because it might get them a job someday. And neither is better or worse, but these can level both academic ability and academic vision. Because you can have an honors student side by side with a student for whom school has always been difficult, and service is kind of an equalizer. Now, there will be bosses that emerge within the student groups, but still to let students have different academic abilities, and often it's actually more appealing to students who struggle a bit more because they may be more able to engage in something that's got some kinesthetic pieces to the learning rather than just simply sitting. Sometimes they haven't done well in high school because they just couldn't sit still, but if they could get up and move. And so there are some real benefits to service learning that can be considered. And so I said this earlier today, and I really do believe it. Unintentional or not, when we tell students what it means to be a RA, what it means to be in student government, what it means to be able to be selected for some award in a particular area, that's what they're going to work for. And if we, excuse me, if we keep repeating those assignments year over year and don't stop and look at what do today's students need or what experiences do they come with, then we're going to make a miss. I'm sure you experienced this. I know we did post-COVID. We had some students whose interpersonal skills were really limited and whose attention spans were a bit shorter than faculty had seen earlier. And so we have to rethink after sort of major events that could be developmentally and socially significant. I think we have to rethink a lot of what we do and just say, in today's world, and sometimes that world can change on a dime. Who of you remember where you were when everything shut down in March of 2020? So I love travel. I thought I had planned the perfect trip, so I have 2 grandsons. And because I'm the Nana and the parents supported it, I made up this rule: when you turn 10, I take you on a trip. I figured by then they were mature enough that they could be away from their parents. I mean, they're in and out of my house, but to be gone for like a week. And so our grandson turned 10 in July of 2019. And my husband was very ill at the time. He had Parkinson's and dementia and was needing round-the-clock care. And so juggling that and who could come and stay with him, because we could have somebody during the day, but I wanted family overnight. So I said to Nathan, the then 10-year-old, I said, I'm not quite sure when we're going to do this, but we're going to make it work. And he said, it's okay, Nana, I'll be 10 for a whole year. And so that was so sweet. And so my son was working on his doctorate, and we finally lined up that in March of 2020, he could come and stay with my husband. Now, all the stories are coming out about COVID, and I'm religiously on the Center for Disease Control, I'm on the State Department website, I'm on the federal personnel website just to see if things are shutting down. Everything was fine. Everything was fine. So we catch an overnight flight, a red-eye out of Ontario on Thursday night, and get to Reagan National Airport on Friday morning, and we're at the carousel picking up our luggage, and this gentleman said to me, "Where did you come in from?" And I said, "California." He said, "You're going to have to go back. They're closing everything." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Look on your phone." And sure enough, they had announced that morning they were shutting down everything at the end of that day. And so, fortunately, I knew DC well enough. I just said to Nathan, "Okay, we're going to go shower, and we're going to see everything we can at any Smithsonian you want on Friday. And on Saturday, we're going to the private museums, and on Sunday, we're walking the city." And then we ran out of things to do and had to come back. But those kinds of disruptors, we remember it, but I think the ripple effect of those, we don't always readjust systems for them. And so even if you have study away programs, I assume they kind of took a hit, and then rebuilding them, I think parents think a little differently about, do I want to send my son or daughter outside the country when it's kind of a scary world at different times? And so even there, for us to take and if a high reward was travel, we have to unpack the why. What was it that we thought travel gave them, and is there an alternative way that they can get that same byproduct? Because we want to retain the values, but we have to change the practices often. And I think sometimes places I know best are churches and universities. Sometimes any change is seen as changing a value, when all it is changing a practice. So I think for us to say as a core set of experiences that we want our students to have over 4 years at Life Pacific, was the travel, I'm using travel as an example, was that in order to enlarge their view of the world? Was it something unique that they could do only in that location? Or what else was it? And are there alternative ways? I think that becomes even more important as our changing student population. We wrestled with this again when I was in the School of Education. Graduate students can't take a whole semester away if they are parents or if they're working. But yet we believed that an international educational experience was important. So to move that to a 2-week intensive, going to a Christian school in Africa became something that we could do. And let students know early enough in the process, made it optional, but helped get them support for how they could do that. And so if we're rewarding international experiences and that's not available, what happens to the people that are outliers? And so again, for us to be able to be very crucial in saying, at the end of a 4-year or 2-year experience, if they're transfer students, what are the non-negotiables that they need to have a Life Pacific University collegiate experience? And so part of that is to make sure we're in touch with each other. It's very easy to silo, and everybody's busy, and people teach at different times of the day, and you've got staff that are here, some during the day, but if there's student development, they may be here more evenings. So how is it that we find time to begin to do some collaboration? Could it be that an event out of one area could also count? A non-academic area could also be part of an assignment in another. Could it be that if we're trying to do a travel experience, that it could have multiple purposes without adding to the length of the project, but just being more intentional? And then how is it that we provide support and time for faculty and staff to be able to do this together? I think becomes important. And then the other piece is, again, to take these prototypes of students that I talked about this morning, 5 or 6 that use kind of different characteristics of different student groups, and to be able to stop and say, are there groups that are falling off more quickly than others, and are there things we can do to recover it? And it might even be, for some, developing a system where they can go part-time. Now that can cause some financial aid implications, but there are also sometimes additional supports that can be provided. So this idea that we're not siloed, and that if the ultimate experience is for us to graduate well-rounded, Christ-loving, educated people who can make a difference in the world, let's model it here and show how it is that we can work together on that. We are educating the whole person. And in educating the whole person, we need to be able to model some of that relationship building ourselves. I have been on campuses, and since I've been on 3, you won't know which one, where it would have been impossible for somebody in student development to teach a first-year seminar. They're not academic enough, they don't have a degree, whatever. I think one of the best things we can do early on is to begin to understand our students from different parts of their person. I think we can be so, the saying, at least my grandmother was from the South, so spiritually minded that we're no earthly good. I think we can be so academically minded that we are no relationally good. And I would just urge that we continue to find places that we can connect together. So let me stop here. Which parts of this are you all already doing? Like what are you already doing that might be collaborative, that might be rethinking the delivery or the frequency of requirements? What are your accommodations for commuters as it relates to whether it's chapel or any kind of requirement for service learning? What's going on here?
So thinking about the whole person, on the East Campus, we just over the summer have an influx of newly married students and a few married couples who have children. And so we're dreaming and talking about some discipling groups and care groups for this particular entity, because that's never happened before. And what a great opportunity. Yep. And just trying to read the room of who is here, and how can we see them as a whole person, as you were saying.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah.
And I think particularly because if we don't have the flexibility and the engagement enough to know, we can continue to offer programs that we've always done for 10 years and it no longer meets. And so if we even think of like an expiration date, any new program we launch, we review after 2 years and determine, is this a go, no-go?
Yeah.
And how does it need to be modified? Because in our busyness, we can sometimes just replicate the same thing.
And I have one more example. So Christiansburg, Blacksburg, we are like sister communities. So Virginia Tech is there. And so in the summer, businesses like go in this drought of needing employees, and then they get flooded when everybody gets back. The beautiful thing is we start a week to 10 days earlier than Virginia Tech. And so we have already sent out a flyer to or made available to our students, hey, these are jobs that are currently open. So if you want to go ahead and start applying now, like go ahead and get in on the game before 22,000 people come.
Yep, that kind of sensitivity is really good. I'm reminded when I was at American University, we got a pretty interesting inquiry one day from the tourism board of the state of Delaware, which was only like an hour and a half from us. And they wanted us to start after Labor Day because they were losing all their employees. So even to be able to be in good partnership with things that are win-wins for students and the institution can be a good thing.
Agreed.
I work in student life as the director of residence life, and we actually have a partnership with academics for a Life Summer Bridge program, which this is students who are conditionally accepted because of GPA have to do kind of a crash course with success skills, academic skills with Professor Edwards as well. So we mutually, us three right here, we train up student leaders to be kind of like these hybrid summer RAs, but also academic peer mentors. So that's how we've had a recent collaboration that's been pretty successful.
That's great. That's great. And it gives one more thing on the resume for those student leaders to be able to do. And so that's the other piece. Using student help is a benefit for us, but for them too. So thanks. How long have you been doing that?
I just started in the director role for about 2 months, but I was the assistant director for a couple years prior. But I worked in academics before, and then I've kind of gone back and forth a bit.
How long has the program been?
Oh, this is its second summer, so going on our second year.
And so what kind of evaluation did you do after summer one to see if you just cut and paste or if you change?
Josh, did we have a formal evaluation for the Zoom audience?
So what we did was we met with all the different departments that were involved, and kind of we were able to get feedback and say like where things worked, where things didn't. I wouldn't say that it was like how we do faculty program assessments. It wasn't that formal, but that's actually what we're going to be starting after this year. Is we're going to have actually someone try to bring someone in, an outside perspective, to try and evaluate the program to see where we can improve.
Yeah, and sorry for putting you on the spot.
No, it's okay.
I do like to hear, are we constantly checking to say, this was a great idea, but it didn't match the group of students that came in.
Yeah, and that's kind of the hard part, because we're already seeing it that the group that we had last year is already very different from the group that we have this year. So, and we knew that going in after when we started to debrief us three about that program, was like, this was a great group of students. We're going to have a completely different group of students next year, and they're probably going to be a lot different in a lot of different ways. And that ended up being true. And so we kind of prepared for that in a lot of the activities that we did, and changed a lot of things based off the fact that we could adapt to the different temperament of the students that came in. So we were already prepared for that.
That's good. What else is going on that would support some of these initiatives? There you go.
As we talk about shifting needs of students, even since COVID, we've seen a lot of those needs change. So right when we went online, when everything did shut down, we started success coaches, we did some peer mentoring, and some of those things naturally continued once we came back online, because we saw how it supported the whole student. They got that extra support. We also did things like we totally reworked our first year seminar course. It used to be a 1-credit course, then it went to a 3-credit course to really help give some of those healthy habits as they start and launch into their college career. And then we're also seeing, as we're talking about Christian higher education, a lot of our students aren't even coming in prepared for the biblical part of their education, even students who have grown up in the church. And so kind of relooking at that of how can we meet them where they're at to make sure that they're successful here, because that is a huge part of what we do here at LPU. And so those are just a couple of things that came to mind as you were sharing.
Good. Yeah, I read something, I can't even remember where, so I can't cite my source, but it's not me, okay? But the rise of really large churches with large youth groups means that some of what is typically heard in Sunday sermons, they're not hearing. And so the biblical literacy in many settings has decreased. And so, now I should know this and I don't. Do you require students to sign a statement of faith to attend?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's always a challenge then if you find that they aren't where you thought they might be. So are there some things intentionally that have been done differently, either in terms of how chapel is done or in the early theology classes? I'm looking at both sides of the room for this.
Yeah, and I can let some faculty speak to that too, but I know we have been more intentional, and that was part of the first year seminar reconstruction is making sure we're incorporating even the culture of LPU and the history of LPU so students know what to
point.
expect as they continue their education here at LPU.
It's good.
Yeah, on the biblical studies side, we recently revamped our theology course framework, and so we actually added an introduction to Christian theology class on the front end of our theology program. So all of our students in our Bible Corps now are going to take that same intro class because, as George mentioned, same reason, we just find biblical literacy is really low, so lots of introduction in that whole class.
Yeah. How's that been received?
So far, really well. It's brand new. We did it just last year, I think. So we've only done it 2
And
semesters
students
so
don't know
far.
it's changed because they've never been a freshman before.
Yeah, to them it's a class. So,
But,
yeah.
but I wondered 2 things. How did the faculty feel? Did it feel remedial to faculty, or did it feel like something we just need to do? And then the second is, for students that came who were very biblically literate, did they resist the class?
I haven't found that students have resisted the class yet. It seems like it's a good refresher for some of the kids who are coming in with some idea of biblical literacy. And one of the things we're looking out for in my departments is redundancy. And this class has felt like it's actually been helpful to kind of lay a groundwork that we can then build on. So the faculty seems pretty positive about it, but we're always addressing, are we hitting anything unnecessarily too many times?
That's great.
So that's the main thing we're evaluating on that right now.
Thank you. Are there other disciplines that are finding that you're having to revamp first-year classes in particular to ensure that students have a chance of being successful? I think we've got a hand over here.
I have no authority to say what's changed or not changed, but I think a big part is like just working with student skills and English and kind of the first like 100 level courses. Just the prevalence of AI and a lot of students coming in that like talking to certain students, just like how prevalent it is in high school and how it's used almost as a way to kind of like supplement, but students don't actually get the skills. And so then we're kind of having to uncover what's under the rug, I guess you can say. So then part of it too is we do student placement, like English placement test. And so just seeing students, we're doing an analog and seeing like, oh, okay, what you came in with and what we're seeing. And so I think that's been, at least for me and like how we've been in the earlier parts of their development, is figuring out how to best approach kind of just the development of AI, but also like how do we get them to grow in the skills of that too.
Yeah. Yeah, AI will change a number of things. I also know that kind of any new technology has always scared people. And so I think this one has a dual thing. One has to do with academic integrity, and I think that's an important piece, but yeah. I remember when it was a big fight about could you have a graphing calculator and actually take a test and what happens if you couldn't graph? And it's like, well, how many times have I, even with a minor in math, stat, computer science, I haven't graphed in years, so I think it didn't hurt me. But anyhow, anybody else?
I think that we noticed in our department, I teach research methods, and it's a 300 level class. I think I came from maybe a graduate level mentality. And we were very heavy in quantitative data and very heavy in like the articles, scientific articles and things like that. And then I realized that people weren't able to point out the basics
Right.
of a article and how to find one. And so in the midst of the class, we had to rethink about how does this work for our population. I mean, we have students who are hoping to go into ministry, psychology, business, but we don't have people who are hoping to go into like analysis, like data analysis. So we had to think about how do we cater this to serve them, but also continue to hold the value of wanting our students to be well-educated and good researchers.
It's back to that principle, retain the value, change the practice.
Yeah.
And I think it's really good that, I mean, you acknowledge changing your perspective of what needed to be done. And that's what, as academics, we assume everybody's going to be at an academic level. We need some that are at great practitioner levels who can do. So
Absolutely.
sounds good. Did you also have your hand up in pink?
No.
Oh, okay. Anybody else?
You're back.
Well, As we wrap up, let's see. I do believe this is why we do what we do. Any of you could be working at any other university, or you could be working in industry. And money's never been a driver for me, but a lot of people would say, and making a lot more money. But I do think that there is this unique piece of being able to be a part of the transforming work of God in the world through what we do best, which is academics. And in a Christian university environment, we not only have the permission, we have the responsibility that we are more than educating to a discipline and to a degree. We're helping people developmentally at those core years in their life to be able to develop as whole people and to sometimes even find what God's call on their life is. Some of them show up at college because mom came here, dad came here, or somebody told them they just need to go to college, and they don't know the why, and we can help them understand that why. And so it's, yeah, I was cool for half a second with my kids at one point because this statement, when I made it in a first speech as the Dean of the School of Education, they shortened it, but they turned it into a t-shirt. And so once you're quoted on a t-shirt, your kids think you're cool for half a second. So anyhow, so as we wrap up here, let me just, I want to pause and ask you to think about what, and you don't have to answer, so there's no microphone required here. But what are the one or two takeaways that might be little tweaks that you're going to do? I'm not talking about revising your syllabus, but even whether it's across campus and beginning to think about these student identity profiles and seeing where we're designed for a group of students and where we're not, or even understanding how students are coming in with different understandings of what college is like and how can we continue to adjust. I'm sure you're already doing some of that well, but what some of the takeaways might be. You all are doing great work, and you, even as I got to talk to some of you over lunch, it's exciting to hear your excitement. I even had the benefit, and I'm not saying, was your husband? Your husband? He came up and was talking with me about he was a former Navy chaplain, and I was telling him that my dad had done clinical pastoral education. He said, I studied under Ray Fitzgerald, and I said, that's my dad. And so they had known each other for, it was after Dad had retired from the Navy, but he continued to do so. And then Dr. Remy and I worked together at APU some years ago, and as I heard several of your stories, we may be just a few miles apart, but we're all working on Christian higher ed together. And in my years of doing enrollment management, which was for 2 years, in addition to student development, one of the things I said to our recruiters is we will never speak against another Christian university. Anytime we can get a kid into a Christian university, that's a kingdom win and it's a kid win. And so we are delighted to partner and appreciative for what you do. And I'm loving hearing your success stories. So now I'm going to do, it's either a good thing, I'm letting you out 9 minutes early, or a bad thing that I didn't fulfill my contract. But anyhow, thank you so much. It's good to be with all of you.